All right, so let's dive right in. So again, today's goal is really simple. We're going to share the Microsoft Incentive Programs that can help you start, accelerate, or solidify. And I'll tell you what I mean by solidify your Microsoft 365 and Azure solutions. And start. Depending on where you're at, like, are you in the cloud? Are you looking at the cloud? We can talk about how to start, do things like total cost analysis, compatibility analysis. How do we get from point A to point B successfully? How do you ensure it's secure when you're there? Or maybe you're in that hybrid setup where you've got some things in the cloud. Maybe you've moved, for example, a real simple example, like we've moved email, but you're wondering what file systems or even Teams or tools like that can do, or how you can manage your end users more effectively with Microsoft 365. We can talk about how you can accelerate that, or solidify. Maybe you've been there, done that, and you're adopting a lot of solutions. But with today's climate, you have security concerns, and you're wanting to make sure that the environment that you have built is, the way you intended to, and that you've done everything you need to do to mitigate security risks as much as possible, as well as respond to threats. There are funding programs and opportunities to do that as well. So no matter where you are in the cloud journey, we should have something that will be able to help you, take it a step further, or reassure and solidify the environments that you have today. So how are we going to get there? Do a quick introduction of eGroup. Tell you a little bit about who we are, tell you what we do in the Microsoft space as well as elsewhere, because a lot of times when you're talking about things like Microsoft Azure, we're talking about Microsoft solutions for a platform, but we're also talking about other solutions that are more traditional to the data center that can help you adopt cloud more successfully in those hybrid configurations, or you're moving from something you've had for a while to the cloud. We'll talk a little bit about our expertise and the history of where we're coming from to help you get there. We'll talk about the available funding, why we're all here today, exactly what programs are available. I'll lead off with educating a little bit on the programs, what they're called, kind of what their purpose is. And then we'll talk about some successful outcomes that we've seen over the last year or so, having done, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of these types of engagements to be able to help organizations have success. And then most importantly, how to get started. If something we talk about sparks an idea, or you have something you want to throw at us to see what we can make happen, we'll tell you very specifically how to get started. And that's really an easy one. Shoot us an email, give us a call, talk to your Microsoft account rep, talk to your eGroup account rep, talk to me, talk to Dan, drop something in the chat. We respond to all kinds of communication. So let's get moving here a little bit. So who is eGroup? We were founded in 1999, so over 2 decades of success and what we call delivering speed and certainty to our clients. We believe that our clients engage groups like ours for fast and certain outcomes. We do things hundreds of times that most organizations only do once in their history. So we get the opportunity to help you accelerate those projects and get them right the first time, by inserting just-in-time expertise, as well as experience, from what to do, but also most importantly as well, what not to do when doing some of these projects. We have the ability to do that. We're a Microsoft managed national partner with a focus on 2 clouds, namely Microsoft 365 and Azure. So everything in the Microsoft 365 suite, from basic email to Office applications, all the way to endpoint security, endpoint management, and some of the more advanced security compliance, data loss prevention controls. And then on the Azure side, what we like to call a move and improve configuration, as opposed to a lift and shift. We can help you take critical infrastructure and host that inside of Azure. But also, as we're doing that, we can talk about better ways to support that create more security, less maintenance, and better outcomes overall. So with that experience, we have everything from the planning side, often called, architecture, design, roadmap planning, but also from how do you manage it, things like governance, particularly when you get in the cloud like Azure, and it can do 3,000 things, but you only need it to do 3. Yes. We'll talk about how you can dial that in, how you can govern that, how you can do optimization, how you can do cost optimization, all of that stuff. So I did see a quick question come in. Are we a CSP provider? We are. Yes. So we've been a CSP provider for going on 5 or 6 years, and have many customers, both in the enterprise agreement, the Microsoft Cloud Agreement space, but also Office 365, CSP, and Azure. And I can tell you a little bit more about the licensing program there. With CSP, there are additional incentives, when we talk about funding and things like that, that are available for CSP customers. Everything from ongoing discounts off MSRP for cloud solutions that are competitive against other licensing programs, to even additional support capabilities that we can provide through things like our Microsoft Premier support with for partners agreement that allows you to save some costs on support, but be able to access the resources you need. So yes, we are absolutely a CSP provider. Switching slides here and going beyond Microsoft. I promise I won't read you any of these lists, right? But going on beyond Microsoft 365 and what we do in Azure, we like to say eGroup's born in the data center. We've been around for 2 decades. I've had the opportunity to be around for 13 years of that. So when we talk about eGroup's experience, we talk about eGroup's experience prior to the word cloud even being a term, and talk about what we've done in the data center and leveraging that deep experience and skill set to help organizations be successful in the cloud, whether we're talking about infrastructure, networking, advanced networking, cloud connectivity, things like virtual desktops, what we've done on premises, how can we do those in the cloud? How can we create this as a service model across SaaS applications, platform as a service applications, and infrastructure tools to create an optimized environment for you? eGroup comes from a deep experience in being able to do that in the data center as well as the cloud, or across both in those hybrid scenarios. So enough about us. Let's get right into the incentive programs here. Lots of words on this, and you guys will get the recording, so I want to make sure I put all the information in here, but it's really more simple than the words lay out. You basically have a programmatic solution called PI in the Microsoft terms. It's called Partner Investment Engine, where Microsoft provides qualified partners like eGroup funds to help you do things from assessment and design, total cost of ownership, licensing uplifts, design and architecture, proof of concepts, or even implementation funds, both in the Azure space and in the Microsoft 365 space, to help you successfully adopt cloud. Now, which one of these specific programs, like if we're talking about Azure Everywhere, Azure Everywhere is really good for organizations that are starting their cloud journey. They're looking to migrate workloads. They're looking to do things like advanced security deployments. They're looking to do anything from planning, workshops, education, to all the way from migration to management activities across the board. Azure Everywhere really fits everywhere, all pun intended there, for those types of things. It's designed to be a flexible program that you can use once a year to help you be successful. And we'll drill down a little bit more in the next few slides about where that's happened specifically, so that you might have some ideas of how you can use it. But it is a flexible bucket of money that we can programmatically access to be able to help you drive more cloud. And ultimately, the goal there is adoption of cloud. So if you have something where you're going to increase or start spending in Microsoft Azure, we can typically leverage Microsoft Azure Everywhere funds or other funding programs to be able to help you. I say typically because there are some qualification requirements that we have to work through on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, it's pretty flexible. The next one in the list is a much more structured offering. This is a service that Microsoft provides in addition to what eGroup can help you out with. So you can combine Azure Express with Azure Everywhere to be able to do 2 things. Azure Express is the ability to put collectors in your environment if you want to know what it's going to look like to adopt Azure solutions. Azure Express is a way to assess the compatibility, understand what's in your environment, understand the actual performance, not the as configured performance, understand what the cost would look like in the cloud, what chances for optimization are there applications that would be suited better as a service as opposed to a server, those types of things. To be able to get all those answers, Microsoft provides that free to small, mid, and large customers pretty much across the board for anybody looking to explore cloud, and provides that information to you as well as eGroup, so that we can then take that a step further and help build you a better roadmap with a better cost analysis, so that when you look at the cloud, you can answer that question we always get, like, what's it going to cost and how much can I trust this cost? What gotchas are there? Exposing a lot of the information that Azure Express does in under 30 days, typically on an engagement, with no charge to you, allows us to have the information we need to be able to confidently say that we can adopt cloud. And then lastly, on the Azure side, Azure AMP. I'm going to say AMP like it has one M. Two M's is a little too much, right? New program name, same thing as the original AMP program, but there's a lot of additional things in it. AMP is a specialized tier for Microsoft funded partners like eGroup, where we've achieved advanced specializations in various different workloads, things like Azure Virtual Desktop, for example, that beyond Azure Everywhere and beyond Azure Express, certain partners, kind of the top of the portfolio that's achieved those advanced specializations, are able to access additional funding to help you go further with implementations and specific scenarios. So that said, like if we get through a design and architecture, a POC, we get through Azure Express, and you say, this sounds great, let's do it. We can always look to AMP to see if there's additional funds that we can access to help take that next step as well. So more money, always better, helps you get a little bit further in your journey. And then on the Microsoft 365 side, you'll see that Microsoft 365 Everywhere is very similar to Azure Everywhere, right? It's funding for everything on the Microsoft 365 side, whether you're looking to do things like deploy E5 licenses, do advanced security, you're looking to do some security and compliance assessments, advanced workload adoption, those types of things like Intune, things like mobile device management, conditional access, the premium tier of Azure AD. That's where Microsoft 365 Everywhere is positioned for. Now, you did hear me say advanced a little bit. Microsoft 365 Everywhere is not for things like Exchange on-prem to Exchange online migrations. The vast majority of customers, have done that. I think it's 80% plus these days of organizations are on the online platform. So some of those things are not funded, or they can be funded in certain specific things. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But this is for advanced workloads, particularly pandemic related type stuff that we've been seeing a lot of it, with like I am working remotely today. Now that I'm working remotely and I don't want to have a VPN and I travel all over the place, how do we secure the laptop I'm on? How do we manage it? How do we make sure it's compliant with company policy through things like Defender and Intune before it ever connects to my corporate email and my file system environment, so that we can have a secure and productive workforce? That's really what Microsoft 365 Everywhere is for today. And the security adoption, this is a new program for Microsoft this year. If you think of it, not necessarily in the category of Microsoft 365, but Microsoft has broken out Azure and Microsoft 365 workloads for migration into their own buckets. And now security is its own component. So whether it's inside of Azure, whether it's inside of Microsoft 365, all the security components, this is a program that allows us to do things like the advanced security components, doing security assessments of your existing environments, doing things like Sentinel, Windows Defender, anything related to security of your Azure workloads or your Microsoft 365 workloads now has its own funding program that we can access separately, which is important because now you have a third program that you can access within the same fiscal year for even more funding opportunities and taking things further. It's been extremely popular, and I'll share that with some of our success stories. And with last but not least, Teams. We're on Teams today. So, obviously we do a lot of Teams and we do a lot of Teams deployments, and how do we help end users be productive? There is a specific funding bucket for helping do Teams POCs, particularly around things like if you're looking to integrate your voice solutions with Teams. So like today, if you call me on my desk phone, there is actually not a desk phone anymore. It'll ring my mobile phone through Teams. It'll ring this laptop. If I'm driving in the car, it'll ring my Apple CarPlay. All of those different things. How do you create a connected experience, but also maintain things like your traditional telco providers and things like that for traditional dialing scenarios? How do we bring all that stuff together? If you need adoption exercises, training, bringing in other third-party apps, there's specific buckets for Teams and deploying Teams integrated solutions. All right.
Jason, real quick, we had a good question from the audience here. So kind of a two-part question, and I think I covered some of it in the chat, but would Azure Disaster Recovery Services, that's part one, and then Power BI deployments, would those two areas fall into these incentive programs?
Yes and yes. So if you'll be a little patient with me, this slide's we're gonna talk about disaster recovery. As you can see, what the third check mark to the right, hybrid cloud disaster recovery, is probably the largest volume of Azure Everywhere engagements that we have conducted outside of just traditional migrations to the cloud, or how do I do the cloud, or building cloud roadmaps. Hybrid cloud disaster recovery, how do you take the idea of how do you take things that are in a data center, ditch the second data center, ditch the third data center, and use Azure as just-in-time resources for disaster recovery operations. What we always call, only pay for it when you need it, as opposed to installing a bunch of infrastructure and maintaining it in the hopes that you never need it. There's a really strong ROI on that financially, but also a scalability to that, and we can share a success story around it. Whether you're using things like traditional backup solutions, whether you're using true disaster recovery solutions like Zerto to replicate information, Azure can be a target for that. And what we can do with Microsoft Azure Everywhere is do a design of the Azure environment, the security, the networking, how do we connect it in VPN to your data center, as well as how do we do disaster recovery to the cloud in a POC, and we can do that in all about a week, right? So it's not a massive POC, but it can show you exactly what hybrid cloud disaster recovery can do. And then going a step further, for those people that are in the cloud, we can also access this funding program to do multi-regional, like if you're in the East Coast and you want to replicate to the West, or say you want to do a multi-cloud scenario where we've even had customers that are in AWS and they want to replicate to Azure to have more baskets for their eggs in terms of a disaster recovery scenario. These programs are designed to fund things like that and those proof of concepts. Great question. I'll get to the Power BI one here in a second. So again, Microsoft Azure Everywhere is flexible pre-sales as well as those post-sales activities for your business. It can be everything from planning and strategy all the way into adoption. It's actually separated into two different buckets. If you just want to do planning and strategy, there's lower dollar amounts available for that so that we can target that very specifically and get that done. Lower dollars doesn't mean less service. It just means, it's right size for the effort we need to do. As well as the adoption activities. If you wanted to do a strategy and plan, but you also wanted to take the leap and do a proof of concept or even start a migration, we can do that as well. And you can expand the funding to do that based on the use case. And then, as mentioned before, we can throw things like Azure Express in there so that eGroup can spend more of the time doing the strategy planning and migrations, and we can have Microsoft do a lot of the data collection for us, which allows the dollars to go further. And some of those examples, again, are the Azure strategy and TCO. That's the traditional, like, how do I get to the cloud? What is it going to cost? And what is it going to take? Are my systems compatible? Am I going to have to do a bunch of work to get there? That will surface all those questions, as well as we can do some proof of concepts with it. Like I was just talking about disaster recovery, data protection is another one. I'm protecting data on premises. How do I replicate that to the cloud? How do I store it directly in the cloud? Ransomware is a concern for all of us. So, that's one of the stories we can talk about there. Virtual desktops, whether you're using something like Horizon or Citrix, or you're interested in using something like Azure Virtual Desktop, the new name for Windows Virtual Desktop POCs and pilots in the cloud are extremely popular with these programs. Hybrid cloud file shares, what do I do with the massive amount of files that are in file shares and Windows file shares that we all know are generally the cause for the spread of things like ransomware? How do we get away from file shares into Microsoft 365 solutions where appropriate? But also, how can we take the large amount of files we have, move archives, or even hybrid store those in Azure in a cost-effective but also available way so that we can scale our business appropriately? And of course, as I've mentioned, migrate to the cloud. Honestly, with this program, it could be anything. It's just, if you have something that you're looking for the cloud to use Azure for that you haven't done in the past, and you need a strategy plan and some help getting there, then that's what this program is for. It's investment amounts are all based on the potential estimate for what you're going to spend, but it's very programmatic, very easy to apply for and receive. All right. And then we were talking about Power BI a little bit. So when we talk about, I always kind of lump Power BI a little bit into this third checkbox as well, business process automation. So when you talk about proof of concepts, what can we do with Power BI, whether that's Power BI workloads in Azure that you're going to embed into applications that you're building, or just Power BI that you're going to use for business process automation, reporting, dashboarding, those types of things. That is an advanced workload inside of Microsoft 365. So it does qualify for some of those Microsoft 365 fundings. You can see on the bottom left under the education and enablement, that bullet that says Power Platform is what we're talking about when we're talking about Power Automate, Power BI, and some of the low code, no code, also business intelligence capabilities there. You can certainly use that for those types of scenarios. But in addition to that, when we talk about that, some of the most popular things lately have been security assessments, ensuring that my Microsoft 365 environment is as intended, it's built right, making sure, how do I get my secure score up? Or even how do I start to use third-party tools like we do in the data center to audit my Microsoft 365 settings so that we can get a third-party checks and balance of what the platform is doing. We have third-party solutions that we can layer on top, and then we can use these funds for helping remediate those types of issues as well with the additional Microsoft advanced SKUs and some of the things that they have. Office 365 migrations, always going on, ever popular. Like I said, it's kind of the funding's geared more towards the advanced workload as opposed to the standard stuff these days, but there's ways we can make that happen as well. We talked about secure identity, SSO, MFA, and CASB. Teams migration, Teams calling, talked about that a little bit. It's been popular. The most popular thing I can say over the last year is absolutely, it's pandemic driven for sure, is Intune and Windows Defender combined with that secure identity. Again, it goes back to my employees are remote, but we've also learned from things, even as they're returning to the office, of where gaps could be. So we want to be able to create that security, but also have that cloud-based management of devices so that I can remove a lot of the challenges I have in managing my devices, keeping them patched, keeping them up to date, or even validating where they're at. And then SharePoint Online migrations, moving files from file servers, as we talked about, has been popular as well. All right, I won't spend a lot of time on this one, but if you look at the other two, and we talk about the programmatic programs, and then some of the other things like Azure Express and the security assessments we talked about, there is what I've always called the Microsoft magic bag of cash called in-customer incentive funds. If we have an idea and you have a Microsoft team, we can, and it doesn't fit one of the necessary programs, and you say like, hey, we're going to do this, and this is what we're going to do, and we can clearly say, yeah, that's gonna be a great deployment and a great success in Azure. We can make a case-by-case basis, submit a defined statement of work, and access two key things: flexible funding while available. Again, it's approved on a case-by-case basis based on what we're doing. We have to involve your Microsoft team in order to do so, which is always a good idea anyways. But also, we can pair that with what the Microsoft Fast Track team can do from helping you implement. So therefore, we have kind of the expertise, resources for architecture, design, getting things going, building things that are out of scope or things that are higher level, more complex activities. Maybe they're more unique to your business that eGroup can help you with. And then we can pair that with Fast Track resources. We always get to those point in projects, particularly like things like MDM rollouts, where now we've got to roll out Intune to 5,000 people. They can bring in resources at no cost to you to help you roll those out and get all those things going so that we can take that project from start to finish and access some funds to either fully or partially offset the cost to do so. So again, it's case by case basis, but usually these are larger funding amounts for larger opportunities. But it is a flexible thing that if you have an idea, it doesn't fit some of the other programs, we can talk about accessing that. All right, and getting towards the end here, I'm gonna mention a few things. Just real quick, I'm gonna hit the first and third one. I'm gonna let Dan jump in on the second one. But just three examples of these are real scenarios. Some of them, could be applied to several customers we did. But I talked about the new Azure migration. One of the things that we did last year that I thought was extremely effective, and you've heard me touch on it, is combining Azure Express with our eGroup Cloud Blueprint engagement funding the free Azure Express assessment from Microsoft, and then eGroup using Azure Everywhere to do the cloud blueprint. We are able to help multiple customers, but there was one in particular, define their Azure landing zone, which is basically, what does Azure need to be configured at? What do the networks look like? How's it going to connect back to my data center? The best practices Azure configuration is what a landing zone is, and it extends into everything to policy, governance, and everything outside of the technical realm. We were able to help them migrate virtual machines. We were helping them through Azure Express identify servers that should be services, and instead of just lifting and shifting those into the cloud and having them be expensive cloud IaaS resources, what we were able to do was help them just immediately move those to services, so that it saved them money and increased success, as opposed to just doing the same thing that they've always done in the data center in somebody else's data center, which is Azure. It's a large data center, but it's still, if you rent a VM and you do nothing different, that's gonna be the most expensive way to do it. If you optimize, that's when cost savings and some of the other benefits can really come into play. And in that vein, moving their file shares to Office 365 was a big win for them. So leveraging these programs, we were able to get both the assessment done as well as the proof of concept before they ever invested their own dollars in services. They made a commitment to eGroup CSP, so we're able to get them a license and start migrating their workloads and do that migration project. Dan, I'll let you speak to number 2 here real quick.
Yeah, so data protection, I think, is top of mind for a lot of organizations, especially with the headlines around ransomware and how to actually recover from that. eGroup has been able to take some of these Azure programs, specifically Azure Everywhere, and we have built out our hybrid cloud backup assessment using that funding program. Really, the goal there is, and for those of you especially that have kind of gone through a backup infrastructure upgrade, it's a lot of time, right? There's a lot of legwork. There's a lot of work to be done in determining not just the solution and its capabilities and how those align with the business, but also what those costs will be around storage, around archive targets, around offsite, second site, whatever you may be doing in terms of multiple copies. So this backup assessment is meant to assess the baseline of what your organization is currently doing. We want to get intimately familiar with the procedures, the SLAs, areas where maybe things are working really well, areas where things obviously need improvement, and we capture all of that, then work through not just an Azure governance workshop to really get you up to speed on Azure's role with backup and disaster recovery and making sure that that's set up properly the first time, but also with some of the newer, more modern backup solutions and how those integrate with Azure. So we make sure that you're familiar with the benefits, the features, the upgrades that you may be seeing compared to existing solutions, and lay that out over to the Azure mapping there. One customer in particular that I wanted to talk about today, they had a legacy system. They were leveraging tape and on-premises storage. We took them through this backup assessment, highlighted the solution Rubrik as one of the solutions that's out there that has immutability from ransomware, meaning they can't have their files overwritten once that backup goes through its process, and extended that out to Azure. And so they were actually able to drastically reduce their on-premises footprint, being able to retain data on-site for those kind of quick recoveries for about 14 days, and then leveraging tiered storage in Azure for data that maybe needed to be recovered out of the cloud, but also data that they could archive in that cloud. And what the data protection assessment did was allow us to get funding for that design, for that blueprint, help set up the target in Azure, and then also help them evaluate that new backup solution. So they were able to modernize that system. We're able to drastically reduce. I think we took about 16U of equipment and brought it down to a 4U form factor with the newer backup solution on premises. And now they're getting that data out to Azure at better SLAs than they had with the older solution. So this was all started. I think the assessment, we were able to secure about $7,500 in funding. The engagement took about 2 to 3 weeks time to collect data, to dig into the results and put the build together. And then the procurement side, right, actually moving forward with the solution, they had a bit lengthier of a process, but they basically had all the design and framework needed to build out their bid, to build out what they needed to ask for, and to actually present this internally. So not just kind of a great way to learn new technology and get it done in an assessment format, but also to be able to get a deliverable from eGroup that you can turn around and present to other stakeholders who may not care about the nitty-gritty details, but more so the financial impacts and what the results will be for the business. So this cloud backup assessment is a great example with the Azure Everywhere program.
Yeah, Dan, I would say, just because the question was asked, if you replaced hybrid data protection with hybrid disaster recovery, a lot of those things remain true, right?
Yep.
It's there's still the complexity on the business side. What are our SLAs? What are RPOs, RTOs, recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives? Understanding that, marrying that to the solutions that need to be in place, and then talking about specifically how the cloud can help meet those in a strategy and design session that could then lead to a proof of concept and then an implementation is
Hmm.
exactly what these programs are geared to get you the answers for. And the last one, endpoint management and security. I've said it a few times, if not three already, but I'll say it again. It's been the most popular thing that I've seen in the last 6 to 9 months, just because, organizations are planning return to office. They're talking about who's going to be remote. But ultimately, cloud identity has moved outside of the firewalls in the traditional way of managing endpoints inside the firewalls. How we do patching, how we do updates, how we do device compliance, all of those different things has changed. And the modern set of Microsoft 365 tools helps us address that more effectively than we've ever been able to do it in the past. In hybrid modes, if we want to integrate different solutions, or if we want to go kind of all in with the cloud managed. With this specific customer, they kind of enterprise customer, lots of different users, financial industry, very lots of security challenges, lots of security audits around this. I can't say that enough. There was a lot of hoops to jump through in terms of the security side. We were able to use our eGroup Modern Office Roadmap sessions, as well as our Modern Device Proof of Concept engagement funded by ESIF, that flexible bag of money we were talking about, to help them deploy about 1,000 users over a 4 to 5 month period for Exchange Online, OneDrive, Teams, Intune, conditional access, onboarding mobile devices, iOS, Android, laptops, Mac, Win 10, as well as their internal VDI environment that's on Horizon, to be able to help them deliver critical applications anywhere securely, and ensure that the people that have access to those, whether they're accessing VDI or whether they're accessing files in the cloud, are doing that through the same conditional access policies. And those conditional access policies include things like multi-factor authentication, but also, is the device I'm trying to access from compliant? So was able to do a good amount of that, the planning, the POCs, as well as some of the implementation, leveraging those ESIF funds, and create a big success story to them. Now that when they talk about, what are they doing with the future of office work, they can truly say our employees can work from anywhere. They're probably going to say, like, these people are going back to the office. It makes more sense for them. These people can be flexible, but at the same time, IT doesn't have to worry about the security posture of one scenario versus the other, because they have a flexible system that ensures everybody goes through a standardized policy. All right. So wrapping up here, I do want to say thank you to everybody who attended. We can hang out. But also, Carly and our marketing team puts on a lot of events, and we appreciate it. And I know there's a lot of regular attendees here. But we do an event called Microsoft Teams Tuesdays every other Tuesday. It's an Ask Me Anything style, where we do light education, like 10, 15 minutes on something that's topical. I know things like the Microsoft 365 desktop, and things like that, and how Teams. So really, it's Teams, but anything that kind of goes into that Microsoft 365 world can be talked about. If you have questions, join, ask questions, be a regular attendee. We always have our experts on there ready to help you every other Tuesday. So please feel free to register and join when you can. And at the same time, if you're talking about modern data centers, we have our Nutanix at 9 events on Wednesdays. Those are every other Wednesday, so the opposite weeks. Dan, who you just heard from, leads those events along with our director of data center and the Nutanix team. And we talk about how, outside of the Microsoft world, how we can modernize your data center for success, so that what we envision as Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, and Nutanix on premises allows you to have those cloud-like, easy to manage, simplistic, highly valuable solutions wherever you need it, right? Because we live in a world that not everything's destined for the cloud. So some things will remain on-prem. So how do we accomplish those results as well? Nutanix is a great solution for that. So with that, I will wrap up, say thank you to everybody. If anybody has any questions, we'll hang out for a minute. We'll go ahead and stop the recording, and happy to answer your questions. Or if you want to reach out to me directly with an idea or a question, please feel free to do so.